at the time of the second coming is called the first resurrection. It will happen after the Great Tribulation. It will introduce the great 1,000-year reign, which is the first stage of the ages to come. Now we've arrived in the book of Revelation at what appears to be a further new heaven and new earth. I want to explain what I mean there when I say a further new heaven and new earth. Because back in 2 Peter, Peter had talked about a new heaven and new earth in regard to the second coming. So you've got a new heaven and new earth at the second coming. I want to refer to that text quite expressly. And verse 13, we've got this here. According to his promise, we are looking for a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness will dwell. And that is the event of the parousia. If you look back at verse 4 in that 2 Peter 3, people are saying, where's the promise of his parousia? Well, we're looking forward to that parousia, Peter says, and it's called a new heaven and a new earth. So if when we come to Revelation 21, we're thinking of new heaven and new earth, as we should, most people would say this must be a further renewal. So you've got a two-stage renewal. One new heaven and new earth at the second coming, and a further renewal 1,000 years later, which is the final stage of God's revelation. That's probably the way to go with that. I wouldn't die for that necessarily, but that's the most obvious way to go, as we'll see as we go through the 21st chapter.
In Hebrews 1, we have probably the hardest verse or the hardest passage for people who do not believe Jesus is also the creator God. And this is, we believe this is a reference to the Son. There's a what's known as a catena sequence or chain of,
Yes.
of scriptures here being applied to the begotten Son of God. And, he's greater than the angels and so forth. Psalm 45 is applied to him as the messianic king who is called God. But then we get to this verse 10. In the beginning, O Lord, you laid the foundations of the earth. The heavens are the work of your hands. Is this a reference, or could this be a reference to that Revelation 21?
Oh, well, absolutely. And the renewal before that, I would include both the renewals. We talked about a renewal at the second coming and very probably another further renewal. Both of them are the work of the Son. You will not find that by reading Psalm 102 in your version, because the Hebrew reads quite differently from the Greek. Of course, any renewal of the heavens and the earth, either at the second coming or 1,000 years later, is the work of the Son. Of course, nothing to do, as you rightly said, with the creation in Genesis.
Let me just quickly share an interesting comment here from a book called Christ is King. It's a reference to Colossians 1:17. All things are held together in him. The statement, says the author, that all things are held together in him reflects the notion of the king as the stabilizer of the cosmos. The theme that the king, not this the messianic king, stabilizes or brings in order, brings together, right? The cosmos by establishing divine heavenly harmony on earth is a common type in the Davidic Psalms and in so it has Psalm 2, the famous Psalm 2 of the nations being brought to submission, Psalm 45, that we just said in Hebrews 1, Psalm 72, which is about King David and how it portrays the king there, King David as a sort of creator almost. Same in Psalm 89. These are all important chapters you must read, by the way, in reference to this. And of course, the all-important Psalm 110 depict the Davidic king as Yahweh's authorized, deputized ruler who stabilizes the created order on God's behalf. Commenting on Psalm 89, Levinson speaks of God's gift of mastery over creation to the king. It is now the Davidic throne that guarantees cosmic stability. David is Yahweh's vicar on earth.
I think that's staggeringly good. It's nothing whatsoever to do with the king being the creator in Genesis. It's everything to do with the King Christ, who is at the right hand of the Father now, being the stabilizer of the universe. Excellent.